Okay. Hi, welcome everybody. So this workshop is developing students as readers, and I'm Dr. Jill Parrott. I'm in the Department of English, which I'm sure you probably associate with reading. We kind of all do, but um, if you remember, those of you who have been around for a while, was one of the co-directors of our previous QEP, Quality Enhancement Plan, that ran from 2017 to 2022 and was all about developing critical readers. And so my co-director, Lisa Bosley, and I kind of took the time with the support of the university to become experts in teaching students how to read, specifically in the ways that we want them to read at the college level and the ways that we want them to read in our disciplines, right? Like students who come to college know how to read, but they don't always have the enthusiasm for it that we have, or the motivation for it that we have, or quite frankly, the skills for it that we have. So this workshop today is going to be an iteration of a workshop that I used to do in that role, with some updated materials, updated data, and also a little bit of discussion about AI and its role in our students as readers, because we just didn't worry about that in 2017 when we started with the former QEP. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that today. And my goal for you as instructors is that when you leave today, you'll feel like you'll have a better understanding of what our role is as faculty and professors in helping students meet these sort of cognitive goals in reading at the college level, and that you'll feel like you have a few tools to be able to do that you can go into your classes, like the next time you have class, and start doing some of this with your students. And these are appropriate at all levels. I use these strategies. I teach English 101 a lot. I have 2 sections of English 101 right now. So I use these strategies with my English 101 students, and I also use a version of these strategies with my graduate level students in our master's program in the department, and everything in between. So they're really widely applicable and transferable to different situations and different students where they are. I need my little clicker. Here we go. Okay, maybe. Nope. Definitely not getting any reaction.
Switch on one side.
Yep, it's on.
Sometimes I have to advance the slide in order for on the computer before.
Sorry, everybody.
Try again.
Okay, cool. So just a little bit of data then, because I think we all have a concept that the students in our classes maybe aren't prepared to read at the level that we want them to read, that they're just maybe generally not prepared for reading at the college level. Good news, we're right about that. Like, the data backs that up. Our feeling that our students aren't quite prepared is accurate. So here's some updated data about that. Last year in 2024, only 40% of test takers who took the ACT, which, as we know, is one of the standardized tests that we use to measure college readiness. 40% of test takers met what they consider the benchmark score for college readiness in reading, and that's a 22. And if you remember, that's out of 36 possible points for the ACT. So to decipher that a little bit, the ACT basically says, like, from the data that we have following students after they've taken the test, it shows that students who score a 22 on our test in reading tend to do okay in college. Like, they're ready for the level of reading that is presented to them in their college classes, in a way that most students who score below that are not ready for those reading challenges. And we all know that standardized tests don't tell us everything, but they do give us some information. And so we know that only 40% of the students who took the ACT made a 22 or above in reading. Okay, way less than half. So we also know that the scores are continuing to decrease in the recent years. Every year, the number goes down a little bit, the average score. And again, this is the score in reading specifically on the ACT, so not the overall ACT score, but that particular score. In the same way there's a score in math and science and English, the score in reading. So you can see we think, and the ACT thinks as well, that that might have something to do with learning gaps due to COVID that we're still trying to sort of get over the hump of, statistically speaking. But in 2022, the average score was 20.4 and down 20.1 in 2023. Not a huge loss, but still trending downward. And just if you're curious, know that women taking the ACT score slightly higher than men, 20.6 compared to 19.6. So just a little bit of statistical distribution there. So that feeling that we have, the reason I want to show this, that feeling that we have that many of our students in our classes really aren't ready, that they can read, but they can't read in the way that we want them to, is accurate. I was like, whoop, I keep skipping 2. There we go. And of course, just a reminder, as you all know, you're probably familiar with these statistics. For our students here at EKU, 43% of them are first generation. I think these statistics are from 23 or 24. They may not be for this fall's incoming class. About 40% are Pell Grant eligible. And we identify approximately 30% of our new incoming freshman students to have an academic readiness deficit, which means they're probably going to take those 4 credit hour English 101 art classes, maybe those 4 credit hour math classes as well, because those are the disciplines that we focus on for academic readiness. And we know that these things correlate with also deficits in just generally being academically ready and college ready. Doesn't cause them, but they are correlated. There we go. Nope. I'm just going to have to be ready that it's going to skip 2 and then I'm going to have to go back. I got the rhythm of it now. Okay, so first thing I want us to do before we start talking is, because like I said, I want this to be very specifically applied to the context for you in your classes. I want you to be able to go into a class later this week or next week and apply some of these things. So I'd like you to think about a particular course where you've noticed that deficit, that you see a need for improvement in students reading, and just identify a text you assign. Anything, maybe an article, a chapter in a textbook, blog post, video, I don't care what it is, any kind of text that you assign them to find meaning out of, to comprehend, to figure out. Think about what is the role of reading for learning with that assignment. So in other words, why are you assigning it? Think about what strategies you, as an expert, would use to read that text. And then think about what you would expect the students to do with their reading assignment. So we'll just take like 2 minutes for you to think on that a little bit. Learning assignment, how would you read it? And what do you want students to do with the assignment? Maybe about 30 more seconds. Okay, I'd love to have a share or two. And for now, we can skip that second question about what strategies you would use, because we're going to come back to that in a little bit. So if anyone would be willing to share just like one thing that you assign and what you want students to do with that assignment.
You go.
I assign the Declaration of Independence and I have them look for principles of just war theory in it.
Okay, awesome. So they need to both understand it and kind of be able to analyze it and apply concepts and ideas to it. Perfect. Excellent. What do you?
So for my theology class, which is study of fish, biology, taxonomy, I have them read textbook chapters that link up with our lecture material. I'm struggling on how to connect that and what the actual purpose is. This is my first time teaching this course, and I personally like to read the chapters because it provides a fuller breadth and depth of material that we just can't get through in class. But I think if it's not linked to learning objectives as well, or specific questions on the exam, then they will get frustrated and like, why am I doing this type of thing? And so, I would personally like them to engage with material, find things that they're interested in and curious about, ask questions, and we can have discussion about those things in class. But
you're great. You're stealing my thunder to what we're getting to, actually, which is fine. That's great. It means you're primed and ready to have this conversation. Yeah, I mean, so the point of thinking about that is that, one online, go ahead. Yeah.
There's a comment in the Zoom chat. Looks like in someone's legal writing class, they often review case law and they want students to actively read the material, for example, highlighting, annotating, to understand the court's reasoning.
Okay, yeah, so you're expecting them not just to read, but to like read actively and to interact with the text, and we're definitely gonna talk about that today. So yeah, the idea is that students kind of don't inherently know what we want them to do with their reading, and they also don't inherently know how we want them to read it. So one of our jobs as faculty who assign students reading, which I imagine is almost every class in the university, that there's some kind of reading involved. One of our jobs is to help them make that connection and to show them how we read and make it very explicit, make it just like absolutely visible to students what we want them to do with the assignment and how all of those things are connected. So the basic idea is that we can no longer say and never should have been saying, read it, it's in the syllabus, right? Like it's there, why didn't you read it, right? Like it is our job to kind of actively make those connections. Oh yeah, this is marketing better. All right, so we just talked about this, but over the course of the QEP and looking through other materials, many professors, educators in general, say that they want students to do these things, which is what we talked about, right? And it doesn't have to be one thing, right? Like, for example, for a textbook, maybe the students are mining the text for information, but you also want them to be able to discuss it in class, or you also want them to critically analyze, right? Like there can be multiple purposes for a reading, and that can also be confusing for students, right? Like they often just want to get through basic comprehension, right? Like if they can just kind of understand what they're reading, great. And even sometimes a step back, if their eyes have crossed over the letters from the first letter in the chapter to the last letter in the chapter, whether they understood it or not in their minds, they might think that they have read it, right? Which is a very different idea than what we have about reading. Okay. So we're going to work through, I think I have 3 effective reading strategies that our students can use. And I'm going to show you how to model that behavior and make it explicit, make it visible for our students. The first is previewing. And I have given to the people in person a copy of a very short introduction from a book that is in my discipline. And for the people who are online, there should be a link that will take you to, excuse me, a Google folder that also has this PDF of the text, so you can follow along. So just so you know, it's the introduction to a book called Orality and Literacy by Walter Ong, and I actually have the book here if anyone here is interested in looking at it. And I've chosen this, I think it's because it's talking about literacy and sort of the reading brain, how humans, the difference between a non-reading brain and a reading brain. But also it's my field, right? So this is my discipline, and certainly you all are expert readers, but I wanted to give a little bit of the feeling that our students might experience in that it might not be your discipline, right? Like it's a little bit uncomfortable. Might be a little bit outside your normal, what you read in your discipline. Yeah.
Kevin wants to know what the book was called.
Orality and literacy. It's written on the top left corner, although it might be slight. So this is one of my favorites. And also this is kind of professional level, graduate level reading. Certainly not something that I would give to freshmen to read. But like I said, you all are expert readers, but I'm trying to give you something that might be just the tiniest little bit outside of your purview to give you a little bit of that experience. So if you were in my class, I'm going to model this behavior. If you were my students and I were your instructor and we were going to read this, I would start the either if it's in person, the class period before we're going to start using, discussing, etc. this piece, or in an online class, potentially the week before, like a quick question or the module before, the activity before, in some way. Start getting the students thinking about what they already know about the topic, right? So this is metacognitive, which I know is kind of has been for the last decade, a little bit of a buzzword in education, and we all get annoyed about buzzwords. But the thing is that we know when it comes to critical reading that it is in fact actually what works. That's what the research tells us works with critical reading. So any suggestion that I make about how to improve student reading is always going to have a metacognitive aspect to it. So previewing is metacognitive, as I was saying, in that it calls on students' prior knowledge. And it only takes, in person, less than 5 minutes sometimes. So I might do something like, okay, so the title of this book is Orality and Literacy. Somebody tell me what you already know about that. What's the difference between those two things? So I'm really asking, what's the difference?
Orality, I think of spoken word,
Uh-huh.
and literacy, I think of reading written.
Great.
language.
So if we're going to talk about the difference, if this text is going to talk about the difference between these two things when it comes to the way humans think and communicate with one another, go ahead and write down 2 predictions. What do you think that Ong is going to say about that? Where is this going to go? Where do you predict this is going to go? You can just write these down. And I'll give you guys a few seconds to actively participate.
And for those in person, Kelly Smith from the library said they have an ebook, limited access, and I can get you all that link if you want.
Oh, thanks, Kelly. It's a good one. Okay, so from that, I might not even ask students to tell me their predictions. If I had time, maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't, right? You don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But the important thing is that you already have them thinking about it. And if you have the students connect to what they already know, those of us who do reading studies, feel that sets them up to feel like they can make a connection here, like Vygotsky educational theory, zone of proximal development, right? Like they already have some knowledge, so that gives them a step up that is not completely new to them, that if they already know something, that they can continue to learn something about it. Having to make predictions, or another good tactic in that case is to ask questions that they think might be answered in the text, is also building off of that. We think that students are more likely to go back to the text or finish the text if they have questions about it that they want answered. If they already feel like they've started it and that they have an investment in it, then they're less likely to ignore that it exists and that they should be looking at it for class. So it takes, like I said, 5 minutes or less to get them started in the text. And the outcome, it's this tiny investment, and the outcome on the other side, the benefit that you get from it on the other side can be huge, right? So it makes it more likely that they are going to engage with the text if you preview it a little bit. And I mean, and for one thing, just because you put the seed in their brain, right? Like they're like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to read that thing that we started in class. So previewing, easiest possible way to start motivating students to engage with their reading. Now, if you want to take it a step further, we have something called the Think Aloud protocol, and this comes from a program called Reading Apprenticeship that works with teachers both in K-12 and in secondary ed to train teachers to kind of train students how to be more in-depth and more critical and more metacognitive readers. So the way that Think Aloud works, Think Aloud protocol, is it really calls upon the instructor to be a little bit vulnerable, actually, at the start of class, because it's a little bit awkward. You're showing the students by working your way through a text how you read. So it's apprenticing them. You're the expert reader and you're the expert in the discipline, and they're the novices, and you're trying to like bring them closer to your level, right? Like maybe not there, right? Like they're in your one class, they're not going to get a PhD in ichthyology, right? Like you're trying to bring them closer, give them some tools to be able to use. And it's just saying it out loud, making it visible for them, showing them how you read. So I'm going to model this for you. Same text. We're going to use this for all of our examples so you can follow along. And I'm going to do the Think Aloud protocol for just a little bit here. As I read, I want you to take note of strategies that you hear, that you see me using. So in other words, what am I doing as an expert reader to make meaning out of this text? Right? Not just to get from the first letter to the last letter, but to understand it, to make meaning with it, to make connections in some way. Okay, so I'm going to read, you're going to listen, and you're going to think about the strategies that I'm using. And I'm just going to start at the top. Okay. So the book is Orality and Literacy. I generally speaking know what both of those things are, but I'm interested to see where he takes it. And this is an introduction. It looks like it's pretty short. So I'm guessing, based on knowing what an introduction is, that this is just going to pique my interest and give me some general ideas about what the rest of the book is going to talk about. In recent years, certain basic differences have been discovered between the ways of managing knowledge. Okay, so I'm curious what that means, managing knowledge, and verbalization. All right, so I know what verbal is, and I know that that's a verb, but I'm wondering how he's going to use that. In primary oral cultures. So I want to know what that is, and he's going to tell me. I see the parentheses. So that's cultures with no knowledge at all of writing. So primary oral cultures are cultures with no knowledge at all of writing, and in cultures deeply affected by the use of writing. Okay, so he's kind of saying there's a big difference there. The implications of the new discoveries have been startling. Ooh, I'm intrigued. Many of the features we have taken for granted in thought and expression in literature, which is one of my deals, philosophy and science, not as much my deals, and even an oral discourse among literates. Okay, so I'm going to pause. And even an oral discourse among literates. So he must be saying there that even people who are like alphabetically literate, cultures who are, they also use oral discourse. So it's not necessarily one or the other, it's building on both. Okay, so and even an oral discourse among literates are not directly native to human existence as such, but have come into being because of the resources which the technology of writing makes available to human consciousness. Okay, I'm going to read that again. Because of the resources which the technology of writing makes available to human consciousness. So there's a connection between technologies of writing, which I'm guessing are like pens and pencils and typewriters and word processors and the printing press and things like that, and human consciousness. So we have had to revise our understanding of human identity. That's a big claim. That's a big jump from like the pen and the pencil to our understanding of human identity. So I'm curious how how he fills in that gap between them. Okay, so I'll stop there after one paragraph. What did you notice me doing? What strategies did I use to make meaning with that text?
You started off by trying to assess sort of the genre or type of writing that it was. You were reflecting on the fact that it's an introduction
Yeah,
and that there's certain expectations with an introduction to an academic.
yeah, perfect. Even if I don't know the content, I know what an introduction, right? Prior knowledge. Perfect. What else?
You had an internal dialogue to just point out things that interested you and that you would want to check up on later as you continue reading text.
Yeah, so I stopped at things that interest me. I paused in those places, like if they caught my attention, I didn't just keep rolling, like I took a second to acknowledge, like, oh, that's interesting, like the startling, right? The word startling, I was like, oh, that's interesting, I want to see what that is. Perfect. What else?
What does that mean? Is a question you asked.
Yeah.
You acknowledge lack of understanding
Yeah,
or
so
need to learn.
yeah, perfect. A couple of things there. I'm asking questions, but also sort of acknowledging difficulty or acknowledging where there's like a gap in my current understanding of the topic. Any others or anything like that? Yeah.
Someone said past knowledge, curiosity, translation into layman's terms, repetition, making connections within the text and your own experience, then asking yourself questions as you read terms that were ambiguous.
Yeah. So I heard connecting to past or prior knowledge, connecting to other things that I know. And there's something about putting in layman's terms. So I'm going to call that summary, or also in reading science words, we call that checking understanding, which is super metacognitive, right? Like thinking about your thinking, trying to figure out what you know and don't know and how you can get to knowing the things that you don't know, right? Like what strategies do you need to use to get from not knowing to knowing? So this is a fantastic list. What I recommend doing with this in your class, talking needs more. What I recommend doing with this in your class is kind of just what I just did, right? Taking a piece that they are about to read and getting them started with it by showing them how you read it. So I'm an expert reader. I'm an expert in my field. I know the tricks to figure out what's going on here. Let me show you. Here are the tricks. Here's what I do. Here are the tricks that I use to make sense out of this. And it's really important when doing that to get this out of your way, see, to show the difficulty, right? To show that reading, once again, is not reading from the first letter to the last letter and just hoping that you get some kind of meaning out of it. It's pausing, it's having an internal dialogue, and sometimes it's difficult, right? Sometimes it's, oh gosh, I didn't get that on the first read through. I got to go back and read that phrase again, right? Checking my understanding and going, nope, I didn't understand that. I need to take another stab at it, right? So why do you think, why might it be important to show students difficulty?
To know that it's normal.
Yes,
They
absolutely.
can expect it.
Yeah, so students who are often much more, of course, inexperienced readers than we are, often have the idea, and there's documentation of this, they often have the idea that if they can't get it on the first try, or if they have difficulty in some way, that it's them that, you know, like throw up their hands, I'm just stupid, I'm not going to be able to get this, and they walk away from it. So it's incredibly beneficial for them to see, no, reading is just hard, right? Like reading is difficult, especially when they get into those more upper level classes in your specific disciplines. And my specific discipline, which is what this one is, like, I mean, I have to reread stuff, right? And I've been doing this for 20 years, right? So for them to see that it's just part of the deal, right? Like that's just what we do when we read. We come across difficult passages. But one of the differences between us as expert readers and them as less experienced readers is that we don't give up, right? Like we have the tools and the stamina and the resilience to go, well, I didn't understand that passage. I'm going to try it again, or I'm going to look up these words, or I'm going to make a note and keep reading and come back to it and see if reading the rest of the chapter is going to help me understand it. Or all those different kind of strategies that we do without thinking about it, almost as second nature. They don't have that habit of mind yet. So we want them to get to that place with a habit of mind. And one way for us to do that is to just show them how we do it, to read through it and show them that it's also difficult for us. Okay, so.
But also, like, at least I hope when I do something like that, it kind of humanizes me as a professor, it makes me more relatable and approachable and less intimidating.
Absolutely. So if they are having difficulty with their reading, they might feel more comfortable coming to you and saying, I'm having difficulty with their reading, or going to the middle studio or the Student Success Center or other tutors or whatever it might be. Absolutely.
Kelly has her hand up.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry, I haven't spoken all morning. I just realized. So I just wanted to mention, because what you referred to just a second ago was a very growth mindset kind of thing in terms of reading.
Yeah.
And we're talking about that actually in GSD this week. So I think it's helpful to remind maybe students about this idea of growth mindset. And that applies even to things like reading, which they might think they already know how to do, but you know, that there's always a way to get better. So I thought that was interesting.
Absolutely right, Kelly. Yeah, I mean, for my students, I want them to better understand that it's not a them problem, that it's a reading thing, right? Like that's just the nature of reading, not something sort of inherently wrong with them as a person. Although it is their responsibility to build the skills. So ways that you can use this in class. Like I said, anytime you're introducing a reading or in the middle of a reading, especially one that you think might be difficult, just get up in class and kind of talk it out with them. As I said earlier, it is kind of awkward. I am more comfortable with it now because I have literally done it dozens of times in these kinds of workshops in front of people, but it can be a little awkward, so it's maybe worth a little bit of practice. This is also a wonderful strategy to use as a preview. So to connect to our previous strategy, right? To get started with the reading by standing up or sitting, whatever, or being online and creating a video. I've done that as well for online classes. Done the think aloud by creating a video and putting it in as the preview for a text that we're going to read. That's a great way to do it. And if you're feeling good, feeling froggy with the Think Aloud protocol, you can also, as the semester progresses, have students do it as well. Like put a text in front of them and have them break up maybe into pairs and just sort of talk their way through a couple of paragraphs together as a way to build, again, this understanding that they're not the only ones who have difficulty, to see how other students handle the difficulty, and honestly just get comfortable like talking about reading as a difficult skill instead of just something that they're struggling with quietly in their dorm room or something. Okay, any questions about Think Aloud before I go to the next one? Give us a pause here. Okay. I'll go to our third one then, which is talking to the text. It is similar to Think Aloud in that it's pulling on this metacognitive strategy of making visible the invisible, showing students how we read as expert readers and that kind of stuff. The only difference is it's actually visible instead of saying it out loud. So basically talking to the text is annotations, right? And I would suggest giving students structure for their annotations rather than just telling them to annotate the text, because quite frankly, they don't know how, right? In reading studies, we kind of joke about the highlighter, right? Like, have you ever seen a student like maybe with a textbook and they have their highlighter and they think they're annotated and just the whole page is highlighted, right? It's because they really have difficulty kind of picking out what's important and what isn't, because they're an inexperienced reader and maybe don't know the content. Everything seems new, everything seems important, everything gets a highlight, right? So what we suggest is having them use like a colored pencil or a colored pen instead. I know that that's a tiny difference between a highlighter and a pen or a pencil, but they can't take notes and write words on the side with the highlighter. And the highlighter does tend to have that effect of just like, this is important, this is important, this is like highlighting everything. So it does kind of change the dynamic of their relationship with the annotation. I have an example here. These are my annotations for the back side of the handout that you're looking at. I want to take, again, maybe just a minute, 90 seconds here for you to take a second to make any annotations that you would make on this text. So actually, I'll go back so that my annotations don't influence your annotations. And for those of you online, maybe just take some notes about what you would put in the text, how you would annotate the text. A little bit longer. Feel free to stop wherever you are. It's not important that you get all the way through the passage. And now take maybe just another 30 seconds to note what you did. Can you give a name to the strategies that you used? If you don't mind, we're going to take a look at my annotations for a bit, and just in case, because it is a little small, I'll just read some of the writing and point out a little bit. So I've underlined a few things. I've circled synchronically and diachronically there as vocabulary words that I wanted to make sure that I understand. And I emphasize for my students, this is something that I suggest for vocabulary words, that vocabulary words are things that you look up, which is, again, like a great modeling behavior for students, is they don't have to be words that you don't know. I try to model and show them all the time that sometimes I will look up a word that I think I know, that I felt like before I looked at this sentence that I knew what that word meant, but I'm not sure I'm entirely understanding it in this sentence. So I'm going to look it up again and make sure I understand how it's being used in that sentence, because I want them to do that as well. So I try to show them that. So I basically know what synchronically means. I was less sure about diachronically, so I looked it up and put the very short definitions over to the side. I like to draw little pictures, like visuals that help me understand. So you can see on the left there, he's talking about the movement from oral culture to writing culture, and then he distinguishes between a writing culture and a print culture, and now an electronic culture. So I have that visual to help me understand the movement that he's talking about. I've highlighted secondary orality up in the far top right corner. And then again, I like visuals. So I've sort of drawn this like sassy arrow there between mentality and structures, because I have a question about what the relationship is between those two things. I put a little star to, next to something that I find important. So I want to point out again that I could have only done maybe like 20% of this with a highlighter, right? Like you need the pen to really be able to interact with the text. And on that point, I want to point out that reading apprenticeship calls annotating talking to the text. And the idea that is that annotating just means like taking notes, right? But talking to the text shows students that we can interact with the text, that it is not sort of this inviolate, sacred thing that they can't ask questions about, or that they can't look up, or that they can't mark on. So it sets up, I think, success in thinking about reading as an active activity, an active habit, and annotating can seem slightly passive to them or generic, whereas talking to the text is more active. Okay, so between what you saw me doing and what you did yourself, let's make a list of talk to the text strategies that we use to make sense of, make meaning with this text. What you got? I'll get us started. We have definitions, right? Like vocab, looking up words. And these can be the same as overview, for sure.
Asking critical questions.
Okay, questions for sure. Questions?
Summarize.
Yes. Summarizing, and summarizing is usually connected to a specific strategy that students like called chunking. I don't know if you've ever used or talked to students about that, where it's basically like you take a section or a paragraph or a short part of the text at a time and don't move on until you've summarized it. What else? What else did you do, or what else do you see here?
In graduate school, I was taught analytical outlining, which is basically outlining arguments. So like, what's a thesis, or what are supporting arguments?
Okay.
What is evidence for the arguments?
So that's basically analysis, right? What's the main point? Oops. And then identifying the evidence that backs up that main point as you read. Is that okay? Cool. I have visuals on mine, and honestly, I would connect that to summarizing as well. Like with the orality, writing, print, electronic, I'm using that like visual representation as a representation of my understanding of my summary of the text. So a lot of times the talk to the text is going to be similar to or the same as the think aloud. It's just written. It's just written down. And of course, we want our students interacting actively with our text. We want them annotating because we know as expert readers that it helps us better understand it. And if we go back to reread it again or review it to have classroom discussion or to write about it, that those annotations are going to be the things that we rely on to remind us about the initial experience that we have when we read it the first time. The students aren't always in that habit. One of my favorite stories about talk to the text is that several years ago, I did this with a class. So we were reading a text, and I went through and I annotated it, and I did just this, right? So I pulled it up on the screen and I had my annotations on it, and we were looking through them as a class, which is something, again, that I suggest you do. Visibly show your students either on a projector or put it in Canvas or something like that. Here's how I read the text. These are the annotations that I made. Not for the whole reading, right, but for a sample of their reading and to model for them the kind of behavior that you want them to be moving toward. Anyway, so I pulled up on the projector, and this boy in the back, he raised his hand and he goes, "So you're telling me you really do this? This is what you do when you read, like every time you read, you do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, pretty much." Yeah, and it just like blew his mind that this was a practice that that good readers do, right? Like he'd never seen before this activity, this interaction with a text. He'd never been shown that that's how expert readers make meaning with the text and do so actively. So recently in my 2 101 classes, I had them as an assignment. I gave them really specific instructions for annotation, this annotation style. I'll put it here. It's called STC. I'm not really talking about it today, but it's great. So if you're interested in teaching your students like a really specific metacognitive way to annotate, I'd be happy to show you how to do that or point you to some resources for it. Anyway, so I taught them how to do that. And they practiced it for the reading that we were looking at for the day. And then when they came to class, they were supposed to have their annotations. And I put them into pairs, which is a thing that I definitely suggest you do. Share your own. And then like with the think aloud, have them share with one another to, again, build that concept of everybody has difficulty when they read. And also to gain insight into what stood out to other students, what was important to other students when they read, what questions other students had. And then I had them reflect on not only the reading, the content of the reading, which of course they got reading through it with the annotations, but specifically to reflect on the act of annotation, the act of talking to the text and talking to their fellow students about it. And some of their quotes were really interesting. So I want to share student responses to talking to the text and then talking to one another about that. So the student said, I thought it was interesting that the others in my group struggled with the same things I did. I also think through discussion, I understood a lot of his examples and metaphors more. Getting someone's perspective on them helped me see them a little differently, right? So like, total win for me, not grammatically or structurally, but thought process, total win for me. And here's just one more. I feel like a major insight I gained was that we both had similar struggles and successes when reading this text. I feel like that will help me with my mindset while writing, because I will know that it is very likely that people are struggling with similar things. Sorry, that's my type of similar things that I am struggling with. And I promise these are real comments verbatim that my students wrote last week about talking to the text and sharing with one another their annotation. Okay. Next few minutes, I want to spend talking about the relationship between artificial intelligence and reading, just a little bit, a bit of a skim. But before we do that, I'll pause for any questions, comments, concerns about these, like what to do in class, kind of the starter pack for modeling as experts, metacognitive critical reading behavior for our students and helping them to get in the habit of that. Any questions?
Are you, for your class exercise, are you using a level of writing that is typical for the class, or
Yeah.
harder, or no?
So the thing I did, my strategy this time, and it might be different every semester, is we had been reading relatively accessible and relatively short things for our just like the first couple of weeks of class. Brand new freshmen, they're 18. Some of them are still in high school, right? Like I told for instance. So for this particular one, it wasn't a difficult read, but it was quite a bit longer. So I was trying to help them build that stamina by using the annotations so that they knew they had to get all the way through the end with the annotations, and we're going to come in and talk about it. So that was my strategy for this particular assignment. Yeah, but it was just something it's in our OER textbook, right? Like it's just a text for the class. But I could see myself doing it for something harder, like trying to get them over a hump into a reading that's a little more difficult. And certainly for my upperclassmen, I do similar things with texts that are maybe just slightly more difficult than what they're used to try to get them through it. Yeah, it's a really good question. Okay, let's talk AI a little bit, because I know that it's, whoops, I'm sorry, I think I hit the wrong button. There we go. Okay, let's talk about AI just a little bit, because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm concerned about it. Like, I know that students can take the text that I've assigned them. So maybe that longer text that I had them read that week. And instead of sitting down with it and talking to the text, engaging with it actively and using the annotations, they can run it through ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to tell them what it's about, give them highlight some main ideas so that they have to read one paragraph instead of 15 pages and, come in ready to talk about it, right? I don't want my students doing that. I don't think you do either. I've worked on over the last few months ideas for ways that we can give students assignments for reading that will discourage the use of AI, and also some assignments that might use AI, but in a way that at least I find okay ethically. Like I wouldn't hate it if they used it in this way. So I want to throw a few of these at you, and we can certainly talk about it for the last little bit. All right, ideas for encouraging them to read independently, and by that I mean without the support of artificial intelligence. Okay. So one way to do this is to have them document the process, right? So if they turn in their talking to the text, if they're turning in their annotations, then they're being held accountable for actually interacting with the text themselves. So that's something that I love to do. And one thing I like about this is that I did this before AI was a thing for our students. Like this was a best practice, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So it's just doing the things that we've always done, but with the acknowledgement in the back of our minds that AI is out there. So documenting the process. Another great way to encourage them to read independently, to hold them accountable for reading independently and for having their own understanding of the text, is to ask them to organize visually. So basically like create a graphic organizer or some kind of infographic, or to pick out a picture just on a Google image search that they think represents the main idea of the text, right? That's something that ChatGPT is not really going to be able to do very well. Like ChatGPT is, at least now, right? Like ask me again in a few months. But, and especially if you have them do it in class, right? If you say, we're going to read this, you need to understand it, and I'm going to check your understanding next time with a particular activity. You could even put these together, right? Like do your annotations, bring your annotations, and then we're going to do an activity in class, in person, in class. You could say, all right, it's a blank sheet of paper in front of you. How would you draw the main point with the evidence, or how, using a Venn diagram, if that's appropriate, how would you organize a Venn diagram, right? It's going to be discipline specific how this comes together, but not an outline, a drawing. It doesn't have to be a good drawing. I'm a terrible drawer, right? But I can use a graphic organizer, and that could be something that you hand to them. Like, this is a graphic organizer and I want you to use it. I use a very particular graphic organizer to teach my students synthesis, for example, or you could just have them like freehand it, right? Like they're not going to be able to pull up ChatGPT and have ChatGPT draw by hand an understanding of the text. Another great way to encourage them to read independently is to write about those difficulties that we were talking about, right? So ChatGPT is going to be really good at summarizing the text, picking out the main points, maybe being able to highlight some vocabulary words. It's not going to be really good at writing a personal narrative about the difficulties that a reader has had in getting through the text, at identifying stumbling blocks, at identifying what maybe they had to work their way through, what ideas they had to work their way through to get to the end. And of course, you can always just have them do it in person, right? Like I'm in a reading heavy discipline, so this may make more sense for me than it does for other disciplines, but sometimes I just set aside time in class for them to read, right? Like, I want to see your phones put away. I want to see your computers put away. There's a text in front of you for the next 10 minutes. You're going to read the text, and I'm here if you have any questions about it. Nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't suggest spending whole class periods on it or doing that for every page of every possible reading that you have. But I do think there is value in setting aside time in class to do what is an important part of the intellectual work of our courses, right? Okay, so that's the one idea, just like ideas, a few like surface level ideas for like if you're really worried about your students using AI to kind of cut corners in reading, then these are ways to encourage them to read independently. And then I have similar ideas for ways to encourage them to use AI in an ethical way. So if your approach is more they're going to do it anyway. Let me show them how to do it. Or even, hey, this is kind of interesting. The chat GPT can do this. Let's do it together in these ways to, again, model for them how an expert might still use AI for reading, but in a way that makes sense and in a way that is not icky. Right. So here are my ideas for that, encouraging them to use AI ethically. So one thing you can do is compare and evaluate. And by that, I mean, have students write their own summary or perhaps their own, what Steve was describing here, like picking out the main point and identifying the evidence that's being used, or again, whatever's appropriate in your discipline, but their own version of that, and then asking AI to do it and comparing, right? Because that's an analytical and an evaluation intellectual task for them, right? Did AI get it right? Or did I get it right? Are they exactly the same? Maybe, is there anything that I missed? Is there anything AI missed? You could also do that as a class, right? So maybe individually or in small groups, have them write a quick summary or write a quick list or whatever it is, again, that's appropriate for your discipline. And then you as the teacher, ask AI to do that same task, project it, pull it up, and then talk as a class about what they got, the answers they got, how they put things together in their mind compared to how AI put things together. And honestly, I think we might be surprised at how often AI doesn't get it right or gets it just like a little bit wonky, like mostly right, but not quite right. Of course, you can also use it to help them build vocabulary, to, you know, ask AI to explain particular words, or say with the synchronically and diachronically example that I used, to, you know, they can ask AI to explain that in terms of the reading, right? And as long as they're presenting to you and saying, hey, I used AI to help me get through this, or you're doing it as a class activity, at least for me, I think that's a perfectly ethical, at least as far as intellectual work is concerned. I have ethical questions about the existence of AI, but if we're talking about it in terms of intellectual work of a class. And then finally, they might use AI to develop questions about their reading. So instead of starting with AI giving them a summary, they start with asking AI to give them like discussion questions or reading questions for that. And then as they read, they're responsible for answering those questions. And again, you can have them do that individually, or you can do it in some way as a class. What's up online?
Someone asked if you have any advice for applying these strategies to 100% online and asynchronous classes, especially the more accelerated sections.
A few, definitely not perfect. So, just to go back to the strategies that we talked about earlier, I think any of those things, the previewing, the think aloud, or talking to the text, can be done visually or with a video. And that's something I have done with completely online sections before. For AI and online, I think for documenting the process, you can hold them accountable by having them submit their annotations. Either to take a picture and make a PDF of their on hand or by hand, annotations, or if they're using an online software or like Adobe or Preview or something like that to make their annotations, to save the annotations like in the PDF and or take a screenshot and submit those. I would prefer, if that's something that you're going to do, that it not just be a generic submission, but that they're doing something with it in a discussion board, kind of like we did today. So like, here's 2 pages of my annotations in the discussion board, and everybody else has to come in and make a list of the things that they see you doing, or the things that they see that other student, their peer doing, or they compare and contrast between what they noted or found difficulty with writing about difficulties or compared to what their peer did, to make it a little more active and interactive. Writing about difficulties, I think that could be very easily done online as like a journal entry, like a quick response, not something that you as an instructor have to read deeply or give, feedback about comments or anything like that on, but just like a 1 paragraph review for them. And organizing visually, I think, can be done as well. So as far as encouraging them to read independently and designing assignments that do that, I think these can be very easily adapted to that. These might be a little bit more difficult to adapt to an online situation. But again, I think if it's participatory and you're part of it and they're interacting with one another, then that becomes easier. So again, you could always record a screencast, a screen recording of you asking ChatGPT to develop questions for the reading that they're doing. Be very transparent about it. Show them, hey, this is what I'm using to develop your questions. And then, post that in the discussion board and have them respond to it. And maybe also ask them, do you think these questions are good? What's effective or not effective about these questions? Are these questions coming from a disciplinary perspective or from like a generic perspective? What question would you add to this, right? So that it becomes active and participatory rather than sort of generic and something like that. Yeah, it's like there's another question.
Like they said, thanks.
Oh, cool. I think that is, just a quick review. How do these activities, apprentice, novice, readers, right? Because that's the idea that we're experts and they're novices and we're trying to apprentice them to move them through that zone of development to be more expert readers, because it's activating prior knowledge, because it's modeling, because we're not doing all the work, right? Like we're teaching them how to do the intellectual work, we're demonstrating for them, and we're making those thinking processes more visible. You'll have access to this, so I'm going to skip through the long-term improvements and just see if anybody has any other questions or comments before we head off. All right. Well, that's my content for the day. I'm happy to stick around here in person or to talk to anybody online if you have a question that's more specific that you feel more comfortable talking about one-on-one. Okay, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you
And
so
nice to
much.
meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you
Some
too.
good ideas in there.
Yeah, very good.
They all said thanks.
Cool.
Very helpful.
How many people were online?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
You doing, Chris? See ya.